We would ask that everyone on the advisory group, when you speak up to the speakers. And those of you online, please stay muted. Those of you, unless you're the advisory group, then let us know, because I can't see behind me. Let us know when you want to speak. And those of you who are on with the public, there'll be an opportunity for public comment at the end. So yeah, just we do have challenging audio in this room, but we will do our best to be heard online. So we'll just do a roll call real quick. Miranda Baldowski here. Tiana Burton. Billy Credesco.
Here.
Jeannie Gross is excused. Laura Unigi here. Diana Kessler here. Michael Mangini is excused. Judy Nelson. Judy, you could unmute.
Oh, sorry, here.
You. Jim Parks, I believe you said he's coming, but he's on the phone. Aaron Stikatugu. And Rose Dudley. Okay, so we do have a quorum with 5, and more people may join in. So with that, here's the agenda, and we're going to get into the draft chapters pretty quickly, but I did just want to go over the schedule briefly. And if you can see this, then we are tonight, reviewing land use growth and development and parks, open space, trails, and recreation chapters. Those are the 2 that are up for tonight, chapters, and then we have scheduled for you on next month on February 20th, looking at community services, public safety partnerships, and then also resilient economies and housing. That's February 20th. We also have scheduled some additional meetings for you for your second look, if you will, or a re-review of the chapters that you've looked at and have made comments on. So we have a meeting next Thursday, a week from tonight, to look again at diverse cultures and community character, the natural environment chapter, and circulation and transportation. So you all the advisory group, have a copy of those revisions now. And so we'll try to look at those next week with you. And obviously the schedule we can adjust as you need it to slow things down, speed things up, keep them as they are. Then we're hoping, I mean, it depends on what you think tonight. If land use, growth and development, and the parks, recreation, trails, open space chapters, how they look, we're hoping to have revisions back to you February 6th. So that's somewhat open for discussion. We'll see how it rolls out. And then we'll see, after that, then at that point then, after February 20th, you'll have looked at all of the drafts, all of the chapters. We don't have the introduction finished yet, so we'll package it together though, and we're thinking in March, if we can have a complete package plan for you, then what we can do after that is start public open houses and 60-day public.
So will we have appendix 10 sometime in there?
Yes, and you'll have all the appendix as well. Mm-hmm. So do any of the members of the advisory group have any thoughts or comments on this?
Are we all good for next Thursday?
I haven't heard anything. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then, well, we'll get back to this because I will then just bring up the chapter. And I do want to. Did you want to go and just have public introductions or later?
No, we'll just do those later, I think.
Okay, sounds good. And I do apologize. There is a fan noise coming off of the projector. I thought they fixed it earlier this week. So if you're wondering, that's what it is. And that's why I'm speaking extra loud tonight. Okay, I'm not trying to shout over you, but can somebody online, Judy, how does it sound to you?
Well, it's the typical echoey that room always has when you're on the on computer. But if one at a time speaks, it's not bad. But once in a while, it's a little hard to understand. But
Okay.
otherwise, pretty good.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're gonna start, sorry, go ahead. Did somebody say something?
Your projection of student notice is all not.
Okay, I'll be back. I have a backup projector. I have no idea how I will connect to it, but in case this goes out, that. Jessica, do you want to just get started? So, you can just scroll through, this and start getting the advisory comments and personally, do you know what I mean? Well, you know where it is. It's in my office and it is in the. Yes. Or if you can remember, it's in one of those rolling carts, boxes. Okay. But a couple more minutes.
I'm wondering if I could make a comment that pertains to all the chapters we've seen, and not just this one specifically.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jess, are you recording the meeting?
Yep, it's recording.
Thank you. Okay, go.
Okay, in December, I spent a lot of time, as maybe some of the others of you did, looking through the Flagstaff Regional Plan, public comment version, and making comments on that. And one thing I noticed is that it was really hard as one went through it from the beginning through chapter by chapter. The chapters start, they leap into the policy recommendations. And it all feels very abrupt and unanchored by descriptions of community values, etc. So I say this mostly because it made me appreciate all more the format you're using in these drafts. That you have these section heads that review what was learned from all your town halls and focus groups and so forth. And each of the individual chapters also begins by reviewing what we've all learned about community values and priorities and needs and so forth. So that when you get into the meat of the chapter, you know where it's all coming from. And I wanted to say specifically how useful I find that, and how I know by the time you get done with this whole process, you might be under some pressure, make it shorter, make it more concise. There's so much repetition, it's so redundant, blah, blah, blah. But in fact, for the way people will use this over the next 10 years, gosh, I wonder what the county thinks about water. They're going to go to the water chapter. They're not going to start at the beginning and read the whole plan. And they're not going to start with the appendices, looking at the findings from the focus groups. So all this is to say that I really appreciate the format that you're using and the fact that every chapter harkens back to what our community values and priorities and needs are. And I hope that by the time we get to the end, all of that is retained within each individual chapter of the section.
Thank you for that. And I just, I guess a little, that bit of background then, and I think some of you were involved in the focus group work, but you know, there were a lot of community members who put their time into it, so that's why we're trying to make sure that's ready for. Did you want to recognize that Jim Parks and Rose with us? Yes. All right, well, we're going to continue. Jim's not here. Oh, Jim, that's right. Let me think about this.
Sorry about that. Yeah, supposed to introduce myself.
Okay, well, we'll get started, and Jim and Rose, you might hear a fan running, so when you speak, speak extra loud. We're hoping the projector keeps going. And we'll start with our parks, open space, trails, and recreation chapter. So like before, we're going to do some introductions though. Okay, so we have other staff here that you might want to know.
Good evening, and thank you for all the hard work that you've done so far on this comprehensive plan. And I know it's a lot of work, and we really appreciate the time that you've all dedicated to all the chapters. And now the chapter representing our department, the Coconino County Parks and Recreation. And I'm Cynthia Neiman, and I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. And my name is Liz Ruben, the Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation. Thank you all.
I'm Jessica Simmons. I'm the wildlife planner for the county. I work with Melissa, and incidentally, I also work for Parks and Rec.
Continue on.
Continue on. Well, we've already done the. So, as before then, we will scroll through the chapter and take your comments. So this is something that we have our experts here, and Miranda let me know she also has a background in parks and recreation. So we have subject matter experts with us tonight. The value statement, vision statement, needs and issues, you've seen these before. Did anybody have any comments on those? Those summaries?
I did. I would like to insert a couple of things into the value statement and the needs and issues. Okay, for the value statement.
Jim, I'm going to ask you to speak louder and speak up.
Okay, I want to make some insertions into the value statement.
And was it this email that you have sent late? Okay, I do have copies to share with all of them. All right, I didn't get to just email them out.
That's okay, I didn't send it till late.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, third down at the bottom, the last sentence. It says to mitigate and adapt to climate change. I would like to, we already know that mitigation is something we need to do. So I would like to scratch mitigate in and then add before climate change, changing climate, scratch change, and insert and weather patterns. Because it seems as though on the news every night we get into weather patterns and not necessarily, that's not necessarily.
So you're reading from your email,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So what about, and I'm sorry, Judy, and those of you online, I didn't get a chance to email this out to you. I can pull it up on the screen.
Can I ask, Jim, can you say again why you're suggesting take out the word mitigate?
Because we already know that that's what we're doing. As a nation, not as a. Because we've been doing that for 70 years. We've been mitigating the effects of air and water pollution for 70 years.
Yes, but we've been doing a lot of the other things that we talked about in this plan for the last 70 years also.
Are we going to actually mitigate climate change or weather patterns?
Well, every step we take, for example, every pound of fossil fuel emissions that we don't release is a mitigation. So there are actions we can take. We can't do it all by ourselves within Coconino County, but every contribution is a contribution. So I think there are specific mitigation steps, and the city's carbon neutrality plan definitely calls out a number of mitigation steps. So I guess I don't have any problem. In fact, I'd like to see the word mitigate remain in the plan. I think that's consistent with some of the other chapters we've talked about. Your other change, I'm happy to do that.
This is Thad. I tend to like mitigate in the sentence also because it reminds us that as we make decisions and do things that we want to take into account the impact on changing weather. And I think if we remove that from the statement, it kind of it just says we're adapting, which makes sense to the changing climate and weather patterns, but it doesn't really give us kind of remind us that we should do what we can to prevent future weather changes or additional weather changes.
Thank you for that. I just want to remind members of the public, we'll have public comment at the end of the agenda. Yeah, thanks. And you're welcome to send an email or send a comment and we'll get that back to the members of the group. Thank you for that.
Okay, thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, oh yeah, so everyone just want to speak up loud. Okay.
I also tend to want to keep mitigate in there because I feel like mitigating something is you're actually doing something about it. It's more of you take responsibility to do something, and that we can do as a community, as experts, professionals, whatever that may be. But adapting just seems to be more like just let it happen. So that's my feeling.
Anybody else? I'd just like to say the definition of mitigate, which is make less severe, serious, or painful, essentially, making the change of climate less painful in the sense of water scarcity. Of it, you brought up the HOVs, the off-road vehicles, essentially how much that is allowed, going back to the fossil fuels. I just want to bring the definition. So what is the agreement here with the advisory group in terms of that suggestion?
I'm going to say one thing about mitigation. The government uses mitigation as a hammer. So I can leave it in there, but I don't. This county's not going to do anything in mitigation. They have no power to do it. But if we want people to think about it, I guess it's okay.
If it's a feel-good word, yeah, and you want to leave it in there, leave it in there. The county's actually not going to do anything with it.
Is that true? County?
Well, I think, as was mentioned, it's little steps. There are some actions being taken. Takes a village, so to speak. So, but the counties will do what it can, with what that's reasonable for the county. And obviously, it's going to take more than just the county to have a huge impact. But so just to be clear, then it sounds like it's okay to leave the word mitigate in there and then change the last part of that sentence to adapt to changing climate and weather patterns. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe go on.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the needs and issues theme, down at the bottom again. The impact from weather and climate change. Insert weather and between from and climate change. And then on the last sentence where it says decreasing water levels in Lake Powell, I think that decreasing lake water levels and eliminate Lake Powell because we have a lot of lakes here. So I think that that's something that we could do and make it a little more clear, but less
Restrictive.
yeah, I suppose that's a good approach to it.
So let's point out to everybody online so we're under the needs and issues.
Did I speak loud enough?
I don't know,
Yes,
did you-
for me. Mhm.
So Jim, let's just write this last sentence is what you're pointing to.
Yep.
Okay. And just explain one more time.
Where it says decreasing water levels. Insert the word lake between decreasing and water. And then scratch in Lake Powell,
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Thanks.
because we have a lot of lakes.
Got it. Thank you.
If you,
Is everyone in agreement with that?
I agree.
Okay, and then, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was page 1. We're on page 2 then, of the introductory part to the chapter. And I will, it looks like Jim's next comment is on page 3, but did anyone have anything on page 2? No? So then Jim on page 3.
I did want to ask on page 2, just to clarify first, the last sentence, in the introduction. It says in 2022, the outdoor economy brought in 11.7 billion. Oh, okay, pardon me, statewide. Yeah, okay, never mind. I saw the Coconino County. Pardon me. We're good.
Okay, so page 3.
okay, page 3, county parks and natural areas. Cynthia's gonna get a smile out of this because that part's been up quite a bit. Let's see, about the middle sentence there,
Which paragraph?
I'm sorry, as of 2024, second paragraph.
Uh-huh.
Fourth sentence down toward the end. Social opportunities including equestrian arenas and stables. And I would like to put between including and equestrian, rodeo, comma, horse racing, comma. Because we already have the rodeo and two parks that like to have horse racing. And then after arenas, another comma. Sometimes.
Good. The very start of that same sentence, I'm wondering if you define what a hardscape park is. Or is that the same as developed? Or is that going to be a glossary term?
Let me just make sure I read is the first sentence you said?
No, it's the beginning of the same sentence with the equestrian facilities. The county's hardscape parks offer a wide variety.
Yeah, it would be similar to a developed park where we have ball courts, where we have playgrounds,
Sure,
concreted paths, for example.
that's what I would assume. If that's not a term that has.
Yeah, we should define
today.
that.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
you know, I think there are a lot of places that probably have, you know, some short stretch of pavement or a paved parking lot or something, but does that make it a hardscape park?
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Where would we define that at the end?
In the glossary, which I haven't shown to you yet. We're working on updating that.
Okay.
But we'll add this. So, and just to point out, then all of the blue are hyperlinks. Aaron, did you have a
Yeah.
comment?
I think as long as we're kind of butchering that second paragraph, can we include recreation, cultural up in the first paragraph, the second line, it says recreational and educational, but include cultural.
Let me just make sure, oh, here. Up here?
Yeah, because we make mention of it in the second paragraph, but also including that in that, that we're going to call it an introduction to that section. This is suggestion, recommendation.
The Cynthia, it's also, I mean, you have to turn around, it's also up here.
Oh, so you're adding it.
It's down here, see right up here.
Yeah. It's weird, right? When I highlighted it, it's not showing up, but it's right there. Okay, anything else on this? All right, so we're scrolling down to page 4. And this is still in the, under the county parks and natural areas description. So talking about all the parks and natural areas that the county manages. And there is, I do see we need to have a link to the county parks and recreation master plan. If we haven't already had one in there.
Yeah, you have one above.
Okay, so we are trying to link all these plans within the document. And now we're in the section open space and public lands. And I did have, Mike Mangini was not able to make it, but I do have a, this is more related to land use. So I do have a comment from Mike Mangini that we can look at, but I'll give this to you to pass around. Anything, anybody else on this section? Okay. So then trails is the next big section, trails. That's on page 5.
Listen, back to that open space area, do we want to recognize tribal governments or tribal jurisdictions in that area as well? Because
Oh,
it also makes mention to that on the first page of, what is next? On the top of the next page.
at the bottom of
On
it.
page 5 on natural resources and cultural sites. And some of it has, some of the cultural sites may have oversight with tribal jurisdiction in relation to the county as well.
Thank you. Thanks. Do you see that, everybody, where we're in this area, then we would put a reference to, and I know that, Navajo Nation has a, parks. So, yeah, thank you. All right, so back to trails. Anything more to think about in terms of trails?
I had a question. The third sentence in that first paragraph on trails, the county currently provides recreational, multi-use, non-motorized trails. Is there someplace that lays out specifically which trails the county has provided? Or is that only within the parks and natural areas? Or are there other, yeah. What trails is this sentence referring to? As opposed to the many other trail jurisdictions and entities that are providing and maintaining trails that are describe later.
Yes, because I think I'm, sorry.
You mean like a link to the map or something like that?
Yes,
That defines.
yes.
Liz or Cynthia, do you want to respond to that? Is there a map we can link to, or is this something we need to revise?
There are a few maps we can link to. Or do we have a comprehensive map? I don't think we do.
We do not have a comprehensive trails map that shows just the trails that our department manages, because on a county level, those would be very small. But we could certainly state which trails they are, but the trails are in the county managed parks and natural areas, like.
I think that's all you need
That's
to
all we
say,
need to
is add in our parks and natural areas, the county provides trails.
Okay,
This made it sound like, gosh, are they out there providing trails all over the place? That would be great, but not realistic.
So within the county trail system?
Within county parks and natural areas, the county provides trails that connect, blah, blah, blah.
So we're keeping those. Thank you. Okay, so then moving down, there's more discussion on specifics to benefits of open space and trails, and a lot of information on Arizona Scenic Trail, Great Western Trail. So yeah, we don't have a comprehensive map of these, though.
that is correct.
There is a map at the end of this chapter, and the main trail we show on it is the Arizona AZT. So it would be, we'll have to think about that. Given the scale of the county, it's really hard to show all the trails. Although I will put a plug in for the Donny Park, Timberline, Fernwood area plan. There is a pretty comprehensive trail map in that plan. But that's a very small part of the county, so.
Are you all directly involved with the Great Western Trail?
Not directly involved.
Just as it ever comes up, I didn't actually know that it was still rolling until I saw this here. But years ago, they wanted to make it a formal trail to be concert with the Arizona Trail through Baton Ranches. And we said no, and that was with support of the Arizona Game and Fish Department. So I don't know what that trail may be thinking it goes up through that country, but we sure, I see that it's being fully supported here. As being one of the trails and so on and so forth, but for really good reasons, including wildlife, that trail, that effort through the private lands that they need to go through for badness. We said, no, please, we just don't want that. So here it even suggests increasing, the use of it. And anyway, I don't know enough, but I actually thought it had gone away. So anyway, until I read it here, we just, for a lot of really good reasons, can't have that one.
Okay.
Can't promote it all everywhere.
Right.
So where is the Great Western Trail? I mean, where is it?
It actually is further to the west, goes straight up through the Knox. Oh,
Yeah.
and it just gets designated, and then all of a sudden they call it something. It's just like, wait. And anyway, there was been a lot of work with the game department all through there for many years, as you know, a few other things. It just didn't match with the other uses in the area. So, but it just comes straight up through the north and goes to Utah. But it's motorized instead of the Arizona Trail being foot.
I think the motorized trails are bad.
Yeah.
Having dealt with the racers of the world.
The biggest project we have on Baton Ranches today at a landscape scale is directly with the Arizona Game and Fish Department. How do we manage the recreation, particularly the motorized recreation today, much less any increase in it? It's overwhelming.
And you were saying that Arizona Game and Fish was also
Oh, shoot, yes.
not in favor.
Yeah. But by the way, we don't always need Arizona Game and Fish to say it's a bad thing on private land. And I think that's something that over time really does need to be thought of, because interestingly, and on behalf of a lot of folks in the room today, but certainly a lot who are not here as well, some private landowners in Coconino County have stronger ethic and management plans for their lands than the county does. The county will go ask everybody else for the input, but the folks actually have a really strong plan. So I don't know how to emphasize that, but it is true. And anyway, so yes, but in the Arizona Trail case, the game fish was adamantly opposed to going through there as well. And it had to do with our joint projects, particularly with Compton.
Okay.
Better Wrenches has one of the strongest
It's so strong.
management systems, yeah.
So, yeah,
Well, thank you for bringing that.
yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Cynthia, some of this, of the whatever, all these things that are named in this paragraph, are they also part of the Northern Arizona Trail Runners Association?
Arizona Runners Trail Association.
Northern Arizona Trail Runners Association, NATRA?
I'm a member of that, and it's just a running group.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's just a running group.
I thought they would have like maps.
They republish other entities' maps when they're planning a run in a particular place. They have weekly runs, but they don't produce maps themselves in general. And they don't produce or maintain trails themselves. They send volunteers to help on trail days, trail maintenance days.
Yeah, I just know that they have runs and I figured they already have kind of like designated trails that they run, that they have maps of.
They generally will publish, we're gonna, meet someone, we're going to meet to run on such and such a trail. Here are the coordinates, here's a link to a map, or here's somebody's, Strava run from last year when we did this race. But they don't publish maps themselves. They don't have dues. They have nothing except a lot of,
So it's in
volunteer
their by
energy.
map basis. Okay, thank you. Anybody else on this section?
So one thing I recall is that Diablo Trust a few years ago had a big concerted effort around recreation and the conflicts. Was there like a final report or final conclusions or?
That's enforcement.
Oh, okay.
We did that discussion. But it's something we've thought about redoing again, because recreation is huge, huge.
So just remind everybody to speak loud enough.
This is Liz from Parks and Recreation. I can speak to a little bit of that. I will say about a year ago at this time, maybe in the month of February, the Diablo Trust did host a convening group, a meeting. We attended and Forest Service was there as well. I think Game and Fish was there, and I forget what other partners were there. But it was to discuss upcoming work on educational outreach to OHV users. And it was, and they've been doing really concerted efforts, I would say, with the Forest Service over the last several years to get education materials in front of racers, riders, who are perhaps negatively impacting the area. And they really worked hard to get, I think, even dumpsters available in some key areas so that people could, when they're leaving areas, they were just leaving their trash out. They had places to put their trash. So certainly I think what they're doing may change from year to year, but I think they've identified the need to address recreational impacts on the land from OHV use.
And camping.
And camping, yes.
And to update you on that, the whole thing went on like this. The dumpsters, nobody used the dumpsters. And so we're not gonna do that again. And then they tried many times at Habitat 2 to have things that people could come and pick up. And it's not working.
So they're looking to probably change that next year, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, it's a big one.
Hopefully, we can change that. I have here a bill that's supposed to go through the legislature starting next week, I believe. And it's titled Off-Way Vehicles And it doesn't even have a number yet. But it deals with what we're talking about right now, with OHVs, what they're doing, tearing up the land. And I was gonna address this later on, but there's a real problem out there. Billy knows, Diana knows. We're all inundated with these OHVs on the ranches. And it's not, if they would stay, why, this is a personal point, I probably shouldn't bring it up, but I don't know why people get in the machine like that, that's open air, and they drive behind each other for miles and miles, 30 of them at a time sometimes, breathing each other's dust. I don't get it. Maybe that's fun, but I don't get it. But anyway, so the sheriff's department has had a heck of a time trying to enforce things, trying to get ahead of the OHV problem. They've had, when I was a county supervisor, I went down to the Rim Road to investigate a crash one time with an OHV. 4 men in one of those razors were going way too fast on the Rim Road, and they didn't make the last turn. And they went off the Rim Road in Coconino County, but they died in Gila County. 4 of them. They were all related, fathers, sons, and a grandfather. And the only reason that we knew that there was a problem there was because when it went over the edge, it ruptured the fuel tank, started a fire, and the Forest Service responded to the fire. That's the only reason we knew that there was a problem. Anyway, that's the most horrible one. So I hit you with the worst one straight out of the bag. But the problem is kind of never ending because we got to have some law enforcement. We got to have education, as was spoken about here. There's a lot of things going on, and this addresses hopefully all of those. This bill.
Just introduced recently.
It's going to be introduced next week.
Thank you. What's interesting for Parks and Rec, Jim brings in the sheriff's department, which is really important, as you all probably appreciate. So much of the values and the character qualities that the comprehensive plan represents throughout for everybody involved, no matter what chapter we're talking about, comes down to folks being out doing things in Coconino County because of how awesome it is. But those values, as awesome a strength as they are, provides a huge weakness that, unfortunately, when it comes to recreation, has not been very well addressed by anybody. It's just tough. You all may remember the Red Rock Pass deal, right? Nobody pays for Red Rock Pass. Nobody does it. They can't enforce it. They're not, and yet at the same time, the costs for all of the amenities and all of the other things that go into those trails and so on and so forth in that area far exceed the benefit of the revenues and everything else that come back into. On private lands, we're experiencing the same thing as the public lands. And yet, as Jim suggested, our only recourse or any help is not game department or can specifically, it is the sheriff's department. It's the only thing we have. And when you talk about the landscape that we're all talking about, you're really saying, let's promote more recreation, let's put more trails out, let's do more of this, let's do all these things, we'll do education, we'll do all these great things. And yeah, everybody's gonna raise their hand and say, yeah, that's super. And the fact is, we're actually taking ourselves down because we simply can't manage the backside of it. And so anyway, hopefully we're all doing that. So with that, two things. One is Parks and Rec has a huge, I won't say obligation, everybody has it, but the values and principles and the character qualities that are represented in the comprehensive plan it falls on your shoulders. I mean, you're the ones ultimately that are promoting it all. And, you know, and say, hey, this is what makes this county special, you know, is what we've got our trails and our recreation and our tourism and, you know, all these things. With that, you got the obligations and the accountability behind that, that it has to be long-term managed. And the private landowners are trying to figure it out. The game department has been extraordinary at also helping all those compact agreements with other, you know, plans that we're all putting together. And these things are pretty sophisticated. The one that Babbitt's will have out in March is extraordinary. Just like the Parent Ranch, just like the Flying M and Bar with their plans down there. Thinking who else has a compact agreement? These compact agreements are awesome if you don't know about them. But they're,
I'd love to see.
but they're the joint recreation management plans for the private lands in northern Arizona. And if you want to be a part of it, you know, my colleague could sure tell you quite a bit about it. You all could talk about it all day long. But Alex is a little bit newer to it, but I mean, we have everything from rules that say no lead shooting for golden eagles, you know, shooting a prey base, managing recreational sites like SP Crater, where it's closed for half the year, different things. We have all these different things that are going on, which roads are open, which ones are closed, you know, and these things. And, you know, so it's tough when on one hand we want to promote how beautiful our place is, how special it is. On the other hand, it does put a real burden on a lot of different folks. But you have a great responsibility to uphold this values of this place. The bottom line for private and for government is how you pay for that.
Yes.
I think Cynthia wanted to clarify
Yeah,
something.
I just want to say that to be clear, I mean, our focus isn't necessarily and exclusively tourism. You know, our focus when it comes to recreation is also physical health, mental health, quality of life. So, yeah, so it's multifaceted for certain.
And I'd say locals also using it as an experience, so not just tourists.
But it is the unintended consequences that are, you know, they're always a concern and the ones that, I mean, we ourselves manage in our very own parks system, you know, people not understanding what the rules are. How sometimes even taking advantage of the fact that, you know, we're parks people and we're not enforcers, you know, so. And then we do rely on our sheriff's department. We have to rely on it. We call upon them as well to help us.
Well, we're all in it together.
We are all in it together.
So,
for
yeah,
certain.
super.
I want to reiterate what Jim just said. Who's going to pay for all this? Yeah, I think that the maintenance of it and all of that has got to fall. Somebody's got to pay for it. And I think this is not a happy thing, but I think you certainly need to pay. Because we just can't put all the people on the land. It just does not work. You're going to destroy all of these buildings that's talking about will be destroyed. So somebody's going to have to. And if we have a problem, we don't you call the sheriff's office, they can't get out there. So we have a game and fish guy who regularly checks, he is our security person. The sheriff can't get out there. I mean, so that made me back to say, okay, we're gonna have all these people out there. How are we going to pay for it? Whoever we going to be. I think that's a big question.
Well, and it might help to kind of clarify a couple of things. County Parks and Recreation, you guys jump in and manage county parks, not Forest Service. And they're not out enforcing OHVs on Forest Service. So, you know, we've got a budget for county parks maintenance, you guys obviously jump in. But that question about this coordinated enforcement, I mean, that's, if there's an idea about a policy or implementation strategy, that's where we should be looking. I don't, you know, this chapter is really focused on what the county can do, right? In terms of our existing facilities and then coordinate with other agencies, but that's a big question. I think maybe if you want to continue to move on, and then if we get.
I do, but it was I appreciate, this was a very meaningful conversation.
Yeah,
Because,
definitely.
yes, nobody misunderstands that the county is responsible for the county parks. But we're visiting about private land, not Forest Service land. At least I'm not. I'm talking about private land.
Yeah.
And because Northern Arizona and a lot of other is checkerboard, you have the state land issue as well. And so it's a very complex thing. But as a county, when we go to promote and support bills, we just have to remember that they go do that. And you know, all these values that everybody's talking about, the burden actually ends up being on the private landowner. It really does.
Is there clarification needed here?
I don't have one. I'm just not a wordsmith person, but the thing is that, you know, it's more about on one hand, when you go and write a book section on all these trails that you're supporting and all these other things, you just have to remember, nobody can afford the ripple effect. So it's one thing to go support them all, and we all do. We all will raise our hand to do that. I mean, when they wanted to put the Arizona Trail in, yes, Abbott's was like, here's how you can get through northern Arizona. We'll just give you an easement for it through Arizona. So I get that part. But there's a ripple effect, and it's just massive.
And I guess that's what I'm kind of asking, is that a clarification that's needed somehow?
We'll take a look
We
at
can look at
that.
that, and it might be that, you know, private, particularly the large private landowners are taking a burden. They have a burden with the users coming across the land there.
Even marine roads are just different things sometimes. So and then that compact agreement, just to, again, this was meaningful, that compact agreement is, and you probably can help me get knowledgeable about that with Andrew Jones or somebody like that. But these compact agreements are really a powerful tool for the landscape scale. Actually, folks in northern Arizona, and for you to be knowledgeable about that would be good. Real good.
Can they be found online?
But I think, you know, just having a little tutorial about it as well would be handy. But yeah, you can go to the Arizona Game and Fish Department and pull up the compact agreements that some ranches already have. But to understand what they can mean and how they are implemented would be very important as well. But the Aqua Trust is
Every contract agreement is tailored to that ranch.
unique.
Yeah.
Do you have them anywhere around, or are you knowledgeable about it?
Not to the extent of a compact agreement, there's, I think it's tribal ordinances in relation to accessing tribal lands, but it's similar along with a compact, but it's
Oh, Heart Ranch.
tribal regulated, and yeah, Heart Ranch.
Heart Ranch has one.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Because that's a compact agreement under the Apple company has been in that previous.
it's really cool.
But anyway, back to this conversation, the same issues or concerns that private landowners have, I would like to bring that to the surface of private lands and accessing their trail system in the event that there's something that runs through tribal lands that you exit here, you enter a different set of jurisdiction, so to speak, and you're totally on your own at that point in relation to some kind of either county or state jurisdiction that runs tribal may have priority or precedence over that enforcement of these policies of the West.
Have you had any trouble with these OHVs?
Yeah. And like in the case of Pokie, it's totally restricted on big game hunters, those vehicles, so. When people are pulling out some massive elk, you gotta quarter it up, you know? Yeah. And it's not to say they're not being used, obviously, they can't enforce it and be the eyes and all the regional lands that we have, and it's creating trails for some units, like Forest Service and environments. Same issues.
Thanks for bringing that up, yeah. Okay, so continuing on, that is the trail section. A lot of information in here about trails. And then the next section is about partnership and coordination. So we're on page 8. And Jim, you had a comment on page 8.
I did, but we just covered it
Okay,
thoroughly.
okay. So were there any, there are a lot of partnerships, as you have just brought up. that go into managing these facilities. So is there anything else that we need to talk about? And here's the map. That I'm not, and I apologize, it looks terrible on this screen here. If you're online, you'll see all the colors. The colors are totally washed out. But it does show, I'll go to the legend. And you can see, the Arizona National Scenic Trail, and has an icon for the county parks and natural areas. And if anybody wants to see, we've got you've got a printed copy. It's much more colorful than what it looks like on the screen here. As well as the kind of pop out that shows, closer into the Flagstaff region what the county parks are. So I think that there is an update that we still need to this, because there are actually sections of Apache Sicrates National Forest, Prescott National Forest. So there's some labeling that needs to be corrected on this. Does anybody else have any comments on the map? And I do think there's also another correction to wilderness area. So yeah, there's some, and our GIS is working on making these updates, but it does have the new national monument on here, so we're trying to confirm. Sorry, the fan is running again. So are there any comments on the map? How about goals and policies?
On the side, I think the only thing that comes to mind, is maybe tribal partnerships, because when I say that with the intent that there are ceremonial shrines within the county that need access at points when the forest is closed or the county closes roads or something along that line, but working through the process to gain access to some of these sites that may be closed or requires something, for example, access points through private property, something along those lines. If there's a route identified or a contact person or tribal members to the tribal leadership to contact, then we can go about it the right way without involving law enforcement or private owners who would be on or just basically closed. Kind of like a permit system. Kind of going through a legal process, if you will, to get access, knowing that some of these things will happen annually or is, I would say there's enough notice to have a permit emergency transmission. That's kind of something like.
Is that something that you're suggesting would be added as a policy?
Maybe not a policy, but just being referenced.
In the text?
Yeah.
As an industry, hopefully more access on our websites.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I don't know how many. And then there's the other thing that the tribal governments may be aware of the agreement, like in that way. But in the ceremonial race leadership, are they aware of this agreement between the tribal government and that?
Okay.
So, yeah, so you gotta, somewhere it's probably broken on the tribal side, but somewhere that transparency needs to happen with respect to the agreements that trickle down to those people that are actually handling the ceremony or need access to, because not everybody needs access. So,
Yeah, thank you, Sherman.
sorry to throw it into.
Yeah.
We did it directly.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I had that written down on the other one. That's good. Thank you.
Were there any comments on the goals and policies? Sorry, go ahead.
No, just to follow up on that, maybe a little less core than access to ceremonial sites, but I wonder if it might be appropriate to add some sort of a policy recommendation that indigenous names of places, indigenous views of the significance of places, et cetera, be formally included as often as possible when you're creating signage or when you're considering interpretation or when you're, you know, just naming a new unit or a new facility in a county park. You know, we see this increasingly with federal sites, but not nearly as often as we ought to, I'm sure. But
Yeah, I guess the only downfall to that is it attracts more attention than is needed. You know, kind of thing gets pushed away.
well,
So,
yeah, absolutely, for sensitive locations or sites, but do you feel that way about names?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say so.
Places? Yeah, I don't mean revealing sacred or sensitive ceremonial or traditional plant use or that kind of thing. I mean more like, you know, these places have names that have been used for a long time and.
Like the name of a trail or something like that.
Right.
Not the site where.
Right, I don't mean revealing some cultural sensitivity, but, just acknowledging history and naming conventions and so forth, more frequently than we do.
I guess the thing that always comes to mind is kind of like a historical marker. Something along those lines in terms of the description of.
Aaron, we're gonna just have to speak up again, just to the speaker, sorry, so that they can hear you better.
Yeah, something along the lines of a historical marker, just identifying a site for its purposes, for other people and so forth.
Does that sound, so just that sounding a policy we should craft? To, does that, how does that sound to you? I wanna get,
I don't really want to go that far, but if it's necessary, then, yeah.
I think if there's an opportunity for our county to take that opportunity to name something that's with an indigenous name, I think that's, you know, that would cover it, right, Karen? If there's an opportunity to do so. I know our youth really worked really hard to change the Agassiz Peak for the state to Omakee. So I think just things like that are really important, because that's its original name from the very beginning.
What's the name?
Omakee. Am I saying that? Omakee.
House of Love.
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't know that. Cloud house, interpretation.
Yeah.
Cloud home, that is a policy.
yeah, maybe just, if we could just remember to speak one at a time. Sorry, I know people being myself, but yeah.
So just on policy PR3, supporting private landowners, and land management agencies and citizen groups in their efforts to coordinate the planning and maintenance of recreational opportunities on public lands. You know, I think it would be fair enough to also add, you know, on private lands as well, because that's what the county does. And, you know, just even suggesting talking about the Great Western Trail, Arizona Trail, and there's another one I think that we'll be presenting here to the county very soon, going through Babbitts and this and that. So that'd be 3 trails just on Babbitts, but it's all private. And it used to be sponsored by the county inside of things. I guess other places have the same thing too. So really, it's, you know, it's about private land.
Yeah.
In this case here, so.
So I just saw a message come through in the chat, and Jess, I just want to remind you, if you see messages in the chat, to please read them to us, but I did just happen to see a message, people wanted to speak louder. And so I'm going to repeat that then, that was for policy PR3, and add in a note to also support private landowners. Question. Do any of these trails require permits? Anything require a permit?
Our trails?
Yeah, and, yeah.
Yeah, if you're, for example, gonna do a special event on a trail, we certainly wanna know how you're gonna use it, and for that, we would require you to obtain a permit from us.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess my belief, if there is, I think locals having a priority of getting a permit versus, or having enough permits for locals
and then, a separate pot for that, because then tourists take them all, and I'm coming speaking, like, have to see my balls or something.
No, so we don't have that kind of a permit, like an individual use permit.
Yeah,
The only time we issue permits for our trails is when someone is hosting, say, a run. They're conducting some sort of race, whether it be foot race or biking race or something like that. That's the only time we ask for a permit, not individual use.
yeah, okay. Like 3 years, it's a long time to go through the Colorado River, and I want to be so back, and I'm like.
Anything else in the goals and policies or that? And I will just say that Liz and Cynthia worked very hard to consolidate these and make them very streamlined and we think pretty clear and efficient. So thank you. And on the whole chapter, they worked very hard.
I guess one last statement, I said this last time, really connecting Williams, Flagstaff, and Valley and Tucson all together in a trail system would be amazing. For the locals, isn't it?
I think you saw a lot of connectivity,
Yeah.
discussion in here, and that's precisely what.
Yeah, it's supposed to be for me.
Yes, and it's also in our circulation transportation chapter. So, a lot of policies about doing the multimodal, countywide multimodal system. Think of what they have in Utah. That's what we would like to see here at some point.
And that's on page 6 in here.
Okay.
And lastly, on policy PR 17, it refers to the Great Western Trail. Again, I think we just need to look into it. I really don't have anything one way or another to say about it, but it's been highlighted through your several places. And anyway, but there is no authorization for the Great Western Trail on the private lands. And I'm guessing there's no authorization from the state land as well.
So this chapter. Great. Thank you all. So do you want to take a quick break or would you like to jump right into land use?
Well, I think, open right up to everybody else, I'm fine. You all be yourself, everybody.
I'm ready.
Okay. Well, thank you, Liz and Cynthia. You are welcome to stay.
I don't mind staying. I mean, I'd love to hear more, so unless you guys need your space.
It's totally up to you. The next chapter is land use. It may not be quite as fun for you. So.
I'm gonna stick around for a little bit at least.
Okay.
Yeah, I am too, so.
Okay, and can we just ask Jess, is there anything in the chat we should know?
No, nothing in the chat. Well, there was some chat from public, but not from any committee members. So certainly the chat from the public we can hold on to as notes, and maybe if you'd like to review it when we review public comments, that would be fine.
Thanks. Okay, appreciate that. Okay, I'm gonna close this and go into land use. And what I haven't done is brought down the big map that I have printed out for you. Would you mind? It's just leaning right up. It's the existing land use pattern that was leaning up against by the door.
I'd like to just open up a question to everybody here. Reviewing this chapter, we could be here all night long, just out of entertainment, okay? And I mean that, because it's an interesting topic that we all have spent our lifetime doing. Is there a particular way you'd like to harness that discussion? I mean, I think that, because, look, we don't, any conversation we brings up, we can all talk about it. So is there some way that you guys would like to just roll through this straight out, or would you like to break it up and then just tackle things as they come up and we all just need to realize that we can talk about everything all night, or, well, how would you like to do that? And it's pardon me if I'm being presumptive, but I just, I'm with these topics.
You are the chair, you're allowed.
Well, anyway, I still want to be respectful here with everybody. So does anybody have a suggestion or any concern or thought about what this, or do you want to just let it rip and see what we do?
Well, I get lost if it isn't going. From a lot of shoulders, so. I mean, we can do what you want to do, but,
I think that unless there are very specific concerns, I think we should stay low, climb higher level, the best that we can. Because if we go down any deeper into the weeds, we're going to go there. And so if there are concerns after we go through it that still seem relevant and very important in the weeds, then we can ask about that at the end. That would be okay. Would that be fair enough? Kind of roll through it? Okay.
sure you go. I have my suggestions, but I.
Oh, I want to hear it.
No, let's hear one. Wait till after we're done.
I think so. If they're deeper, if they're global stuff, I think we tackle it as we move through it. But if they start to kind of need to be a little bit more detailed discussions, so maybe we can just say, hey, let's go back to this one thing. We can all talk about it that way. Sounds good. Does that sound fair enough, or do you have a suggestion? Just
No, I have what I think is a global or a bigger
Yes.
picture
Well,
issue, but I'll just mention it. I know in the water chapter and maybe a couple of the others, you had in the introductory part, a little background section on the regulatory context or the legal context for issues. And I wonder if you might want to add a few sentences or a paragraph in here that does the same for land use. Just what are the limits of the county's authority with respect to land use? Just what issues,
Can they really-
do you approach a private landowner about? What kind of flexibility is there beyond initial zoning and a conditional use permit?
Yeah.
Or do you just have to wait for 10 years until you do the next plan to address some emerging concern or danger or risk? So anyway, just a review for people who might not know what the limits are in Arizona or in the county.
Got it.
super.
And speaking of the weeds, I'm too into the weeds on this, so I need a bigger perspective. Someone here.
Well, fair enough. And I'm not trying to take anybody away from the weeds. It's just simply if we want to try to at least get the overall context of it, I think we have to roll through it.
And that's why you guys are here, so thanks, yeah.
So do we get to review this again? Because I thought these were the two things that Mike really wanted to get into.
Mike Mungine?
Yeah,
Oh, I think that we can bring them up. I mean, we certainly see them here.
Okay.
Melissa knows what they are.
but this is the first draft we're looking at, right?
Correct.
But don't feel holding
Don't-
back. It's mostly just upfront to, for us to acknowledge that that's potentially what can happen.
Yeah.
All right, well, enough about that, so we can keep going.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go through, and interrupt me at any time, because there is a lot of data we could put in this chapter that we are planning on including in the appendix. More of the population projections, more about the demographics. But we did include, some of the charts that we had created during the outreach, where we learned what the vision and values were. And then we have a little bit in here on demographics. Again, here's some more charts on the issues that were raised during the open focus groups. We talk about places of Coconino County. This map is important because what we want to do with this is we would like to be more interactive with how these are described. So you'll see when we bring you an appendix, these places of Coconino County with the community assessment reports that we created and the focus groups. So we'll link all of those documents. And then, this map does still need some labeling updates, but obviously because of the scale, you've got to look at it up close. But I think what this shows when you really look at the legend, and it's just, I'm so sorry about the quality of what you're seeing on the screen. But, we have all of the indigenous nations on here, all of the local communities as we've known them are labeled on this map. So, yeah. So that's one thing. And then population projections, we don't really need to get into that because this is put out by the state demographer. We just take it from them. Again, a lot of data from the census. Okay, so it's just great information from there. And then, you know, we thought this might be interesting to talk about. And the pie chart is divided into much brighter colors than what you're seeing here. So what I want to point out though is private land. So the slice of private land in the county is 12%. I wanted to ask you guys, we don't have this ready yet, but for those of you who are ranchers, we are working to create more or less an overlay with, based on parcel numbers, and I can talk to you guys later about this, of the parcels that the assessor's office considers to be ranch use. And we're trying to figure out a way to show it on our existing land use pattern map because we learned that about 1,100,000 acres are considered ranch use. So when you start to look at this, then that leaves about 200,000 or 300,000 acres of private land that are not ranches. And then of those, most of those are residential. So we start to see in this type of map, really what the land use is in the county and how widely scattered it becomes, or not how it becomes, but how it is. So that then goes along with land ownership. Okay, that's pretty clear, land ownership. Yeah, go ahead, Sharon.
I think to clarify
And then this map here.
the question you just asked for, probably the municipalities in the Grand Canyon National Park would be the only things on your map that are not grazing lands, because all the tribal lands are grazing lands, all of the Forest Service and all the state lands, and most of the private lands are grazing land. Correct, Billy?
Yeah,
Correct, Rose?
but I think her point was really that, her point was really of the private land. What was ranching, what was, she was saying of that one slice, here's what they're doing. Yeah, which I think would be one of the most valuable maps that the county has.
So if you look at this here, then the yellow is, it's all residential, it's all private residential, but a lot of this is ranching.
How did it get to private residential? That's something that blows my mind.
What do you mean? Sorry, say it again.
How does the county classify it as private residential?
So they're private land, they're privately owned. We know that, they have a parcel number, they're not owned by federal or state. And we looked at zoning. It's just based on zoning.
Okay. Which I think needs to change too, but.
So this map would then
Well,
change.
we're gonna be covered up with houses if we don't want to. Never mind.
It's private land, but it's designated residential because you can build a house up there.
I know, and I
But,
think that's a big problem for keeping ranches together, keeping the large landscapes. But anyway, I didn't know how that, I figured that was zoning. I'll shut up.
It's zoning. And then what we wanted to show, and again, these little inserts are being updated with better labeling, but we wanted to zoom in to those places in the county that have commercial and industrial, so they're like in employment areas. So it's just showing zoning, but we know
Okay.
in Gray Mountain and Cameron and these different areas, that's where our commercial centers are. We have some in Valley, and then again, these maps are being improved, but Marble Canyon has some, Belmont Parks, and these are the areas that really kind of, when you look closer, do have some commercial activities, which are really important areas to have. This information is about the communities, the 9 areas of the county that have an area plan. Remember, an area plan is an amendment to the comprehensive plan, so it's a more specific plan for that community. We talk about then, you know, a lot of this is just a discussion on land use of the county. What's going on? The checkerboard pattern, you know, interspersed. And you can see it on here, you know, the state and the private, how it creates that kind of like chessboard look. The issues with land divisions and lot splits versus subdividing and how it creates problems with access. People there, we often get calls from property owners who can't get to their parcel because there's no legal access. Yeah, so anyway, there's that we talk about, non-conforming uses, you know, like Billy said, we could talk about this all night long.
We might still.
And so then I do want to clarify Mike Mangini's point about aggregate mining. We are required by statute in this plan to identify aggregate mining operations and basically make sure that there's not incompatible land uses. In other words, we're not building small subdivisions right up against mining operations. So that's a statutory requirement. And to illustrate that, we were able to have a map created that shows different aggregate sources, cinders, stone, building stone, and then what they consider to be aggregate mining. So this is where we know the aggregate sources are on from the state mining inspector. It doesn't include those sites on federal land. So we didn't have that information, but you know, we're meeting our statutory requirements by talking about this. Yeah, it's
Does they not have, sites on federal land?
Yes.
They should be on here.
yeah, we don't have that. So the data that we were able to get was from the state mining inspector and they didn't have it mapped. So
They don't have a map?
I didn't see it. It would have been in that same data source.
And also the ADOT is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we realize this is probably missing some sites, but it's what we had available to our GIR mapping. The data we were able to get.
Should we up that ante on that, and put some of those information on there?
Well, so we have to go to the, we can try asking those agencies if they have it. You know, but we have to get the actual mapping file from the agency, if you know what I mean. We don't just make this, we get the map from that agency that tells us where to put the symbol.
Okay, another question, are these on private land? I mean, why is the county, if you're not gonna get all the aggregate sites that are in the county, where'd you get this information? I mean, it looks to me like this is only part of what information, if you want to have this information available, it should be all of it or not part of it.
Well, the data source is the Arizona Geological Survey, and it comes from the state mining inspector. They work together, so it's, you know, it was the source available to us. We don't have this otherwise. We don't have this information in our system. We have to go to other sources to get it. We can ask, we can see if it's available, but I don't want to, you know, create a promise that we can't keep if it's hard sometimes to get the data from other agencies, but this was publicly available.
Well, then, I think we have to be careful, we don't represent this against everything.
Well, I think there is a note in here that the federal, the aggregates on federal lands are not represented. But we'll check on that. Or we can take it out, if you think it's not a complete map.
So if it's supposed to be in the plan, I guess you have to do it in the plan. I mean, if that's part of the date design of what the plan will encompass, then I guess some information is worth nothing on.
So what you have on here is on private land, or, okay. So maybe specifying that.
Yeah, maybe our draft would do it.
Yeah, it is in the text,
But on the map, we should.
on the map, okay, I see what you're saying.
Well, in the text, it says current aggregate mines in the county are shown on figure X. It doesn't say current aggregate mines on private lands in the county.
True,
I would add that. The next sentence does clarify, you don't have federal land locations on there, but
And then this next table, on this big table is, again, this is something that we must identify in the plan, what the land use categories are. One important concept to remember is Coconino County does not have a future land use map. So we don't have a map that, like the Flagstaff Regional Plan, has a future land use map. The county has not had one. We don't have one now. The one exception is the Belmont Area Plan years ago adopted a future land use map. So when that plan was updated, it was, we looked at what would the future be, future development, and made some changes on that. So there is, what's useful about this though is a zone change then, for instance, would, if they're upzoning or downzoning, which rarely happens, but upzoning to a different category, then these are the standards that would apply to that zoning. But we don't have these mapped. This really is just intended to show patterns based on zoning. This could be kind of like an in-between step between, what could eventually become a future land use map, but it's not that.
I have a question about this table, and that is, are these categories and their definitions in terms of density and the abbreviation, well, the zoning district signifiers here and the character descriptions and so forth, are these from some standard source? And if so, we have a citation to that? Or are, in other words, what parts of this, if any, are editable by you or us or the plan or anyone? And to what extent does this come out of Land Planners 101 textbook or something?
Great question. And so I will say that these are currently in our current plan. So they're in the current adopted plan. And I didn't look back to see how long they've been part of the county's comprehensive plan, but I think they've been in place for a long time. We've updated the character descriptions slightly, so they are editable. They're not guided by statute, although statute does want us to identify the character of land uses. This map actually, if you kind of look at the details, we did use these general land use categories and use those to create this map. So that matches that way, but it is also based on zoning. So, this is something, if you look, for instance, at a description of neighborhood commercial, and if in the character, thinking to the future, if there is a rezoning to neighborhood commercial from, for instance, a residential zone to a neighborhood commercial zone, if you think it wants to look different than what we described here, we can. That's why and it's in the current plan, but it looks different because we put it in a table instead of a narrative. So but these are used for rezoning, so these are used for future changes. And it's important to think about the character of those places and what would apply then to a rezoning. We don't have a lot of rezonings in the county, right? So when you really start to think about it, we've got 250, 300,000 acres of private land that is not in ranch use. A lot of it is remote with limited services, limited water. But there are those areas that are our commercial areas, Belmont, Valley, pockets in Fort Valley, Cameron, the Inholding in Tuba City. They're active centers. There has been some rezoning activity. So what do we want those places to look like if they're rezoned? This would be the starting point. And just chime in.
Absolutely, yeah. So these descriptions have served the county well. We really this works. This is a tool that works well. Has worked well in the past, and as Melissa said, we made a couple of tweaks on these character descriptions. So consistency is key, absolutely. When it comes to land use and how land use policy then leads to our zoning districts as regulated by our zoning ordinance. So the other part of that is we have goals and policies in this section that really represent, the vision for the future and the values of the county. And all of that works together really with what's called the findings in the zoning ordinance, the findings that must be made in order to approve a zone change. So that whole system works pretty well to ensure land use compatibility and ensure the right land uses go to the right places. It hasn't been an issue. We have good consistency long term for the county. As Melissa said, we don't do a lot of zone changes, but this tool has worked well, and we continue to make minor tweaks. And then, of course, the goals and policies that you'll see here really are updated based on this comp plan update on just an updated, I would say consistent with previous, but an updated vision and values. Does that help? Any questions on that?
Yeah, thanks for tying that back to the goals and policies. And findings. So that's the chart, and then the last kind of section in this was about paying for growth and development, and again, that's something that the state wants us to talk about.
So before you go into policies, I think now it's fair enough. Thank you for that overview. But everybody needs to have their opportunity to at least start your thoughts as you work through that section. Maybe we'll just go around a little bit, start with Laura, and then we'll just there are things through that you want to talk about, things to bring up, consistencies, inconsistencies, concerns, throughout this section that help us get through the policies. Let's do that.
I asked one of the questions already, and I have little tiny notes that you can look at later.
Okay. So you're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Jim?
No, I got a couple. So all you're on page 5, the 7 sentence down on the needs and issues.
Let me get to it, hold on, Jim, I'm gonna get to it on mine. Keep going, I'll find it.
For affordable.
And speak louder, please, we're getting a message.
For the sentence beginning with for affordable and attainable housing. Down at the end of the sentence, it says, semicolon, addressing wildfires and post-wildfire flooding. I would like to insert after addressing and before wildfires, forest health.
Okay, let me make sure I find this, sorry. Oh, right here, okay, right here.
That makes sense.
Okay. Addressing wildfires, post-wildfire flooding, and forest health.
Well, you can put it in that order. I thought forest health should come before wildfires.
Okay, all right. Got it.
We agree with that. And then, Page 10.
Page 10.
Page 10. Cluster conservation subdivision design. Equate to greater density. And down lower, the benefits of integrated conservation design. What does that mean? What are those terms?
You're looking at right here where it starts with newer subdivision design.
Yes. Down about
I see
the
it, yeah.
bottom of the second paragraph on the land use pattern.
Could you ask your question again?
What do those, what do those, concepts pertain to? Cluster conservation subdivision design. It says it equates to greater density. The benefits of integrated conservation design down below.
So the integrated conservation design gives a developer an option to cluster development in a portion of the property and leaving the rest of it as open space.
Oh.
And there are some incentives for that in our subdivision ordinance in terms of getting an extra, and I can't remember the details, an extra lot or so, based on a formula. To incentivize the clustering, because when you cluster development like that, then it minimizes the impacts to natural areas by keeping the roads in one place, by, you know, if there's happens to be a community wastewater system, an opportunity for that. So if you think, does anyone know the name Ian McCart? Okay, or does Scottish landscape architect from the 1960s came up with this idea, and it's not rocket science, but when you think about a big parcel of land with some natural features on it, instead of building roads throughout the entire parcel, you cluster it in the less sensitive areas. He's the guy that developed the idea of overlay. Sensitive air slopes, vegetation, habitat, and then once you.
Green space.
Yeah, so anyway, that's what that's referring to. And our subdivision ordinance now currently offers that as an option. Does that help? Do we need to clarify it here?
No, ma'am, I think that's fine. I'd like to, if I could, since I'm second on the air,
Speak louder.
go back to the first page. The value statement goes down here. You value diverse options for affordable housing, employment, education. It goes on. I'm concerned that somewhere along the line, we're going to have to deal with high-rise apartment buildings in our rural areas. I don't want that to happen. I understand maybe that your zoning would take care of that. I had some suggestions that if you want to talk about zoning, about this high-rise buildings, apartment buildings in rural areas, that would be great.
Well, zoning doesn't really prevent anything. It guides development. It provides, the tools for developing. So, in our zoning code, then we have the different levels of when you're talking about apartments, that's residential zoning, and to develop an apartment building, that would require a rezoning to multifamily. Our zoning code has got height limits. Right, so the height limit for multifamily, I believe right now, just correct me if I'm wrong, is 40 feet. So right now, there are already limits in the zoning code that would guide any development of an apartment building. And the rezoning, remember the rezoning process then, and it's not already zoned for that, is public process.
What about, high density collective housing? Like, I guess, community housing.
Co-housing?
Yeah, co-housing. Those are my questions, and I know that when I was a county supervisor, I had some folks that were concerned about this after a large community housing development was proposed that was going to be a rehab center. And that's where this comes from.
That's all still guided by zoning. And the uses that are allowed in each zoning district. So I guess ask your question again is, because it's the same answer would apply for any kind of co-housing or community housing or, it's all guided by zoning. And whether or
So
not.
they would have to go for rezoning, right?
Well, it depends on what it is, if there's a parcel that's currently zoned, for instance, for, general commercial, then a nursing home or a rehabilitation facility is allowed. It may need a conditional use permit. But in the residential zones, and I would need to get out my zoning code and we could look at that. It does explain what uses like that are allowed and whether or not they're permitted by right or whether they need a use permit. So yeah, we would need to get more specific into the zone, but that's where the regulations apply.
Okay. So it's on the individual, also basic.
And the zoning.
Okay.
But I will say, then the policies in this document guide changes to the zoning code. So if co-housing, where multiple generations can live together, is something that's important, we don't currently have an option for that. We do in certain zones, but it is not necessarily something that's universally allowed throughout the county. But it is something that fit with the values and needs a zoning code change. That's what gets identified here. Right, because remember, this document guides updates to our ordinances. Because of changing values and conditions.
Well, definitely this is outlined. I wanted to insert without high density collective housing in the value stream after affordable housing. Is that outlined? Anybody? I want to hear objections if that's what you have, please.
Hey, Jim, so this is Jess with staff, and I hear what you're saying, but I think the scenario, the fear concern you have is really we have that taken care of with our vision on what we see for the county's rural lifestyle and character being preserved, and then back to that matrix that Melissa was pointing out to. So really, the right types of land uses can only go to the right types of places where the infrastructure and the character that exists in that area could support the type of housing you're describing. That's kind of I think what you're offering is a solution where there really isn't a problem at this point. We really have a system in place that does ensure compatibility of land use and ensure character of areas. The character of our area is highly valued. Character of existing neighborhoods is one of the main things that is talked about in a zone change. So while in theory someone could ask for a zone change in a very rural area to multifamily zoning to put higher density housing, the practicality, when you look at that table that we were looking at before for the county's land use guide, and when you look at how a zone change has to meet the findings of the zoning ordinance in order to be approved, we tell people all the time, in theory, you could ask for that, but I'm here to tell you, none of us has ever seen that happen. It's not a problem. because there's no way that could be approved. So at this, we kind of have the systems in place so that the right types of land uses, preserving the character that people want in their areas is held onto, is really retained. And Melissa, when you were asking about the residential collective home, there is a conditional use permit available in all the residential zones for residential collective zone. So we really have a pretty good system so far. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of work has gone into previous comp plans, certainly the last comp plan, and updates to the zoning orders that allow a lot of flexibility within our zoning code, a lot of flexibility that still keeps the character of areas what the community wants them to be. In many areas, very rural. And a lot of these problems take care of themselves with a lack of infrastructure. When you're doing on-site wastewater systems, when you don't have community water systems, and when you have a lack of just basic roads in areas, significant road infrastructure, those problems take care of themselves. Really, you don't get higher density housing where none of those things exist. Does that all make sense to you guys?
That was a great explanation.
And so we did hear though, that throughout the county, affordable workforce attainable housing is still an issue, even in our rural locations. So it's not just here in Flagstaff, it's all across the county where housing is an issue. So.
And I would throw in there one great thing that the county has done that got very flexible on is the concept of accessory dwelling units. In all of our residential zoning districts, anyone can add an accessory dwelling unit, and you'd be amazed how many people are, because that accessory dwelling unit is somewhere where an elderly parent, a grown kid, or just a rental. So we really have, we're pretty proud that we were kind of ahead of the curve with other jurisdictions in getting flexible with our land uses to allow for things that did offer some level of affordability, such as accessory dwelling units. So I thought I'd throw that out so we can at least paint the picture of, hey, all of these things we're pointing out, a lot of these are not new issues, and we've really been working with them, and are actually pretty proud that we've made progress on them.
Thank you.
Any further?
Excuse me?
Anything further?
No, sir.
Okay. Y'all, we're gonna need to go past 7 just that little bit tonight, okay? Is there a problem with that? We really should finish this up. We need to get through everybody, make sure they have their opportunity to give some input and be able to review the policies and have a little bit of public comment potentially. Judy, do you have comments that you'd like to bring up with regard to this chapter?
A comment is more my personal comment. I learned a lot about the county from this, and wish that everybody that moves into Coconino County and resides there knew a lot of this information in the form of, just a simple pamphlet or something. Maybe there is something I've never seen, but it was very helpful to me to see the county as a whole, especially living way in the the southern part where we're so surrounded by the forest for miles and miles and don't have much contact with other county properties. And so I appreciate this and was gained a lot from reading this.
All right, Rose, how about you?
Yes, on the first page again, under all cultures and values, all cultures are valued, respected, and preserved. I just want to go down to the 6th line. And then just in general, to have all indigenous words, the word indigenous to be capitalized. And then this kind of different, it just feels out of place to, where it says to gather traditional plants and keep animals. But I do want to add, after traditional plants, visit ceremonial sites. And I don't know about and keep animals. So is that within, like, just say all reservation county areas to keep animals?
It is currently allowed.
Okay, so I don't know why I was,
Yeah.
So that's the first one. I don't have too many. I also wanted to point out, on page 14, I just wanted to ask a question about does Page have an area plan?
So the city of Page is incorporated. Oh, so we don't have jurisdiction over Page. Greenhaven, does not have one. So Greenhaven is actually surrounded by the city of Page.
Oh, okay, perfect. Just wondering. And then. Where did it go? There was something about the census. Because of the chaotic way the census rolled out, can we mention something on that? That it's not, I don't know, to me, I feel like the way the census rolled out the last time, it was either late, they extended it, and then they recalled their extension.
On page 7,
On page 6, 6 at the end. Well, I guess.
Yeah, this is just, remember they conducted it during the pandemic.
Mhm.
It was tough.
So can we say something about that? That toughness of the time? So that it's just relating that this might not be like truly accurate numbers.
Well, and there's the potential of doing a special assessment with the census, essentially to recount. And we have until 2027 to do that. And if we don't, we're done.
So anyway, I just think we should probably,
Because that messes with a lot of, it messes with a lot of data collection.
it does.
So many things.
So
Okay.
I want to call that out. And then on page 25, where it says at the top improvement districts, does the jail district have some sort of something in that area?
So let me just get to that real quick. So we can see the context. Which number is it? It's on the top, at the top. Okay. So, this is specifically referring to improvement districts that a community can create to improve their roads, to form a water improvement district, or even a wastewater district, or fire. The jail district, so these are really about communities being able to tax themselves to fund improvements. It wouldn't be to something like a jail district.
Or some sort of special bond?
No, yeah, but it is allowed by state statute that group of property owners can get together, decide to tax themselves to pave their road.
Okay. Okay. All right, I just wanted to ask about that because I know they're bringing the money somehow. And I'm not really sure how that was.
I will, that's a good point, though. I am gonna get our finance director to make sure this is totally accurate.
So under that, on that same page, under policy details for policy LU.1.1. Is there an example that can be given for policy details? It says communication with indigenous nations regarding project applications within affiliation to those lands is integral to public participation. There's something, it sounds good and everything, but I just want to, or just give me a verbal example.
I can give you a good one.
Okay.
When Balance was going after some renewable energy, the various tribes were all contacted in order to ask for any guidance or input with regard to that particular project. And I know that there were meetings either in Cameron or letters that were sent out to the list of participating tribes. So that's a really good tip that I can think of.
And thank you for that. And then I do, so the policy that's referred to right there, was specifically written to, basically guide that very type of outreach.
And I'm glad it's here. I just wanted to know how that was done, or an example. So thank you.
We're gonna come back, by the way, to the rules and policies in just a moment.
Oh.
Yep. So we're gonna keep trying to come up with some, Rand, what do you got going?
With the needs and issues, I would say abandonment, with the growth, specifically in the valley area. And throughout the years, we've definitely seen abandonment, and then with the growth, I foresee more abandonment, so this is an issue, future issue.
Abandonment of roads,
Of properties.
of properties, oh,
Yeah,
oh,
property abandonment.
okay.
Oh, yeah, well, we already do, but with the growth that's happened, oh, yeah, it's just that outward and valley's not for everyone. And then, water accessibility and how we're dependent on private parties to give us water, page 5. And then, so, yeah, water dependability and accessibility. And then, the tax district, I just had a question. Are you able to do one regarding a water well?
I do believe you can form an improvement district. I do believe that could be done. It would be, again, a self-taxing district. Let's look at that chapter. That's list. I know it's available for roads and fire.
Yeah, water improvement districts are a
And water.
possibility those are often used to fund creating a well and then creating a water distribution system.
Yeah, it does say sanitary or water, so.
Well, I just have to add a statement about water. Without the water, none of us, nothing can exist.
Where would you add that?
Water, I don't know, I'm just putting it out there. Water is extremely important. No, I would just say needs, the water,
Okay.
the importance of water. We talked about impacts to water, but it says climate change means that the issues such as drought and impacts to water, but I don't see anything of water potential poisoning potentialities that could happen, especially if our water aquifer gets poisoned. Again, we're all screwed.
Yeah, and I just to remind everybody, our water resources chapter does get into more details on water quality. So, yeah, just to keep the chapters as, focused or
Dedicated. So that's all I have.
Thank you, super. Sir?
I think the only thing that comes to mind is, I look at the heading on their agenda, it says land use growth and development, this commercial development. Do we make space in this section for referencing that? Because there's a lot of infrastructure mentioned in here, but does that infrastructure also take into consideration commercial development? Like down 89 now, we're looking at a casino and look at kind of like spot businesses, general dollar, maybe not the mom and pop's silver style store, but something along those lines that are more chain. Is this the appropriate place to put something to that effect of how commercial development is going to happen, and if the infrastructure, including the residential, is going to be able to sustain it, along with the economic development and a section back here of generating taxes off of development, but how much taxes can be collected off of the business in relation to offsetting some of those. I don't know if this is the right section to introduce that or have a conversation about it, but I just came to mind that there's no mention or very little mention about commercial development. This section.
Okay, that's so, am I hearing then a bit more about the commercial areas in the county and what's going on there and some, because you will be seeing a chapter on economic development. And
Or
it
maybe,
will-
maybe something along that lines, but if you go down to 89, what's to prevent someone to build a, or put a gas station half a mile down from the last Chevron, just before you climb the summit? So how does that infrastructure, that commercial business with tourism, again, with bathroom usage, water usage, all of that, how does that impact those residents around them? And then this residential development then hindered, if you will, from expanding, or even ranch lands with water seepage into the ground off of that. The groundwater being pumped out of there for those. So I don't know what the
And
right mechanism would be to introduce or have a conversation about that regarding some commercial development. I don't know, maybe we ought to left field.
No, I think I hear what you're saying. So, yeah, like what Rose was saying, looking at impacts of, and there would probably primarily be commercial rezonings, on residential properties, which I do believe the goals and policies speak to that, but, I'm thinking that before, or rather to help explain these smaller maps here, which show the, kind of zoom into our commercial areas. So what I'm hearing is maybe a bit more about commercial activity in these and then tie that into, potential rezoning to make sure that, the impacts to residential areas, which we already have a lot of goals and policies that would look at the character and look at impacts like that in terms of drainage. To the extent that we can, we can't regulate water, as you know, by state statute right now. So does that kind of, would
Yeah,
that be?
I guess something along that line, just some comment or some mention of commercial development along with the subject matter of the land use and growth. I think as we move into communities, then you're gonna have commercial properties coming in to help subsidize those, conveniences, if you will.
So this is Jess from staff, and again, I think to help maybe with the comment, I think I understand, trying to get commercial to where it should go and not to where it shouldn't go, and the land use table that we looked at earlier really does help guide where, what's the purpose of the commercial, and of course the overall chapter discusses, what's the community vision for the future, and what's the community values, and maintaining the character that people want for their areas. And that land use table will help guide where commercial goes. And we do have other plans as well. The Flagstaff, I think the area you're probably talking about also falls within the Flagstaff Regional Plan, which has a land use guide. So when it comes to a rezoning, this chapter will help guide the land use tables within this chapter, and then the goals and policies within this chapter, and then the findings within the zoning ordinance in order to approve a zone change. Really help ensure that a zone change is consistent with this plan and any other applicable plan. I think the areas you're talking about probably would fall within the Flagstaff Regional Plan and the Donny Park Timberline Fernwood Area Plan. So all of their goals and policies, and the land use guide from the land use guide map from the Flagstaff Regional Plan, and just the general concept of land use compatibility, of not negatively impacting surrounding properties or the character of an area. So I think those systems, the county has a pretty good system in place to ensure that's a consistency that we carry forward with this plan update, is we have a pretty good system in place from our plans and going into our zoning ordinance to ensure that we have land use compatibility, that zone changes don't get approved, and there's a public hearing process for that ensures we don't have zone changes that negatively impact neighboring properties or the character of neighborhoods. Does that help answer your questions?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Super. All righty, have I left anybody off? I don't think so. I think that was everybody.
Thank you.
That's not big. Well, Right, I get to look at the clock and say, okay, well, how much do I got left? Whether I get left to it. So with that, I think that I mentioned that I'm not a wordsmith person, so I'll take it out. I think these are terrific comments. We're gonna get a stab at it down the road. So we can move on to policies and goals, and maybe I could be first on that and start off with the policies and goals. So very quickly, I would like to be vulnerable with you all and take this opportunity to quickly reflect back on the comprehensive plans over the last 30 years or whatever it's been. Going back to about 2003, when the county comprehensive plan under this similar framework was developed. And at that time, the group was a different framework as far as the discussions, those things, because it hadn't been really developed yet. And so there was all these groups in a room together. It was much bigger, many more people, extremely diverse group of folks. Grand County Trust, the developers, Chamber of Commerce types, you know, a whole bit, ranchers, this, that. And in those days, in the early 2000s, conversations were not as well defined and cordial as they are today. And the culture and the atmosphere and all was somewhat adverse to each other. But it was really fun, and pardon me, but this was my part in that process, because I didn't really participate on any of those groups in this nest, and young kid. But I absolutely loved the inspiration behind all the Leopold Sand County Almanac. And my responsibilities at Babbitt's are not just ranching. They are passionate. Oh my goodness, my job is better than anybody at any national park. It really is. I get to do everything and anything, and it is just awesome, especially with the people that are home. At that point in time, and along with the Babbitt's thinking about the owners and so on and so forth, the best I could do was really harness in on that whole sense of ethic. And, you know, that we all have an individual responsibility for our participation in a broader community than ourselves, and in figuring out how to also participate in that broader community. So, visited and asked if we could put a quote from Aldo Leopold in the very beginning of that comprehensive plan. And the answer was yes. And in the very front of the Coconino County Comprehensive Plan that in 2000, the beginning of 2003, whatever the equation may be, it is impossible that we as yet know the terms. The answer, if there is any, seems to be in a land ethic or some other force which assigns more obligation to the private landowner. The land ethic then reflects the existence of an ecological conscience, and this in turn reflects the conviction of individual responsibility for the health of the land. Fair enough. Sign me up. And Tyler and everybody else at that time went ahead and put it in there. And as you know, since then, the comprehensive plans have largely been cornerstoned by a sense of ethic. All of the input that comes into these comprehensive plans, from indigenous folks to the national parks, Forest Service, so on and so forth, all these other, that's what we're all having gravitate towards us, right? Is a sense of conviction for health. What Aldo Leopold really hit though, and why this made this so awesome, was that it's the private landowner who ultimately, if they have that sense of responsibility and that conviction goes along with it, great things can happen. So in 2015, it comes back up, and we were all having a great time on that one. A little bit more cordial in those days. The framework was in place, and they kind of guided us through a process similar to now, but it was still a little bit coarse. But we went through this process, and they put in there right away. They expanded. It was expanded. Not only was whatever may be the equation and assigning more obligation to private landowner, but it talks about enlarging the boundaries of the community to include soils, waters, plants, animals, so many other things that the comprehensive plan now does too. And it goes on. brings in a traditional mental chant, does some other things, all really just gravitating to this sense of obligation. And I don't care who it is in this room or anybody else we visit with, everybody has some idea of what this means to them. All right, so there's my little history deal on all of that, because when it comes to the policies, and when I think, what is it about the comprehensive plan, when we say Vision 2045, what is it really that we can be imagining that may be? Well, the fact is I can't. If you'd asked me in 2003 about where we are today, I wouldn't even know cell phones existed yet. So, you know, we're or the data collection that we can do for science now, and all of the other things with genetics and DNA stuff, all this other crazy stuff we can do. I didn't have that in my imagination then. And so to be asked to do the similar thing now, I'm being a little bit more humble, so to speak, to say, you know what, I don't know what it's going to be. But I do know the one thing that will be there is that sense of obligation and conviction to the health of the environment and the communities we're a part of. Period. I don't know what it will look like, but I know that will be there. Especially if we continue to embrace it, acknowledge it, and promote it. Okay, so with all this, where I feel most vulnerable, again, I'm not a poet, so we have to have, if you're helpful wanting to do this, but we have to do it together. One of the goals and policies that could be added that I think makes this comprehensive plan take the next step forward from each of these past efforts would be to have a policy that addresses directly the private landowner's responsibility and obligation to the health of the lands. We give it to everybody else in these comprehensive plans. Let's ask the game and fish, you know, I get that all the time, we all do, you know, I'm gonna say, well, I think we should be doing a whole list of the input from the game and fish. It's like, well, okay, but I know what I want here. Here's the deal. When you do that, you're taking the responsibility and obligation away from me as a landowner and saying, well, we're gonna place these obligations to everybody else and get their input for how you're supposed to be here. But that takes it away from me. And when you take it away from me, then I have no incentive to want to continue to try to do those things that are based on ethic. And so if we could just, as a county, just take that one little bit of faith and trust and suggest in a policy that when we go to do land use discussions about the private land through P&Z, that we're acknowledging that ethics starts with that landowner. And we do this cultural. We'll assign, look, there's all this sits in the culture, as cultures and the peoples, and this, that. The private landowner has to be identified as being substantive to that conversation. So anyway, I would love to see a policy in this section that takes all of the last years, takes all of Leopold's terrific wisdom, the wisdom of all of the cultures throughout eternity here in Coconino County. All these things that we're all talking about, but dish a little bit of that sense of responsibility and obligation to acknowledgement to the landowner. Because I will tell you, Coconino County will pioneer the future of environmental stewardship, landscape scale conservation, innovation, all kinds of other really, really cool things. It's going to come out of those 12, that million two or whatever it is of land that is not being developed. That's where it's going to come from. And through partnerships with people and all the other stuff. But it's going to come from the private landowner. It's not coming from the Forest Service. It's not going to be some great inspiration out of the Park Service. It's not going to be the BLM all of a sudden showing up and having great, huge things and stuff. It's going to be the private landowner and that group that you have in Coconino County today. Change the policy in 30 years if it changes, but that group that you have today across Coconino County and the partnerships that they all represent and participate in at a broad scale should have a policy that says, hey, you know what, we're going to acknowledge you.
Thank you for writing that policy, Billy.
Very good. We'll put it together and get it back to them.
Very good.
Run
Yeah,
through
thanks
the
for that.
AI to see how that.
We are not using AI.
Yes. Wonderful, thank you.
But I think along the same line, private landowners, I think that's been the outcry from tribal nations for a number of years now.
It is.
And, you know, to bring those two together and actually put it in policy into a document of such, I think carries a lot of weight to know that it is a comprehensive thought process behind the establishment of 20 years from now, because it's highly likely I'm gonna develop. So how does that carry forth with the impact that we make from a private landowner and a tribal side to impact our generations to come, landowners and, you know, land users?
I think, when I was at the P and Z, that was something a little bit similar to what, I have brought up with builders who are coming into our area from somewhere else. That there's gotta be an education when they're doing their paperwork or whatever, there's gotta be some education built into that. It's like, this is the community that we have. This is the community you're coming to. There's this that you need to know about and to embrace. And so I think those are some things that are part of what you said. So thank you.
So do we need to go around and talk about the policies, any additions and so on that folks have with regard to policies? We'll start with Laura.
And I mostly, I need little editorial things that I'll just hand in. We don't need to spend time on here.
I'll turn mine into.
The one thing I'll add, Billy, I mean, what you said is so deep about the commitment to stewardship, and somehow this document needs to encourage and help people develop that commitment to stewardship, because I'm thinking about how many people move to the county who haven't been here for 1 or 100 generations and who don't have some of the resources that you all as large property owners have access to now. This document also is going to be guiding the actions of the county itself, which is itself an entity, an organization, and has operations. And so it can't all be about, you know, leaving the landowner to do all the hard work. Acknowledge that that happens in a lot of cases, but acknowledge that some landowners are going to need more help than others to develop and sustain this. And the county itself needs to be held to that same standard. You know, county has a footprint and it needs to operate with the highest ethical and long-term commitments as well. Sorry.
Jim? Policies?
I don't really have anything on these policies except that I feel like the ones that I read that suggested that we do certain things. You know, it occurred to me that who's gonna pay for it? That's the bottom line to me, who's paying for that? Is it gonna be the private landowner? He has to pay for his input into this as far as his own project. New commercial and public and semi-public uses. Well, who's gonna pay for the things that are suggested in this plan? The policy. If we bring them to fruition, who's gonna foot the bill for that? It's gonna be the county, maybe the landowner. But, as far as changing any of these, no, I don't have any.
Well, we better go back up to Judy. On the policies and goals, do you have, some suggestions or input too?
Oh, I'm sorry, me? You're talking,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's really hard for me to hear. But I'm just happy to be a very small part of what's going on in Coconino County. And I'm not real new to the county, but I'm new to this whole learning about the comprehensive plan and have really appreciated the wonderful county we live in.
Super. Thank you. I want to go to
I just have a question. I don't have any changes or anything like that, but there's a policy detail on in holdings. On number 20, page 26, the policy LD5 and policy details. I would just wanted to ask about enforcement. I guess that has to do with who's gonna pay for it. I mean, how's that enforced?
So if I could just jump in real quick, so this policy would then theoretically, if there were ever a request for rezoning, for instance, on an in-holding parcel, that's when this policy would really have some impact. Because it would discourage that change to commercial. Because there aren't services, it's, not the land use. So it would really apply then. There's not a, fund, if you will, to buy up in-holding parcels, but it would address any potential future change to an in-holding parcel. Because there are privately owned parcels surrounded by forest service. That's what that is. Pointed to.
Okay, yes.
Just on the policy OD1, the initiate early and continuous communications, I would say all communities, not just Native American citizens. No, that's all. Again, thank you.
Sir? So as far as the agenda with regard to all this, and we come to the end where maybe we can get a little public participation. And I guess to be fair enough, as far as right here in the room, since you've sat here this whole time, so congratulations to you. Oh. Super. Any input?
Yeah, well, one thing I just wanted to.
Well, I'm gonna say your name, so.
My name is Ben Holiday. I'm the treasurer of Coconino Alliance, with my own nonprofit in Valley, and I'm a resident in Valley. Living in Random also for, fiance, so that's nice. But anyway, what I would like to present to the board and everybody else here about this comprehensive plan is I'm extremely excited about. Like basically what you mentioned is how the formatting and the care and the amount of efforts that we've put into it so that all people are being represented and all the different states of entities are being able to be involved in this process is incredibly important, and the maintenance of what the community wants to be maintained is incredibly important. I'm excited about that, and I've been part of this since the beginning of the comprehensive plan. I've gone to several meetings. I've been a part of, when you guys came out to Valley, I was part of that too. So I've been a part of this process throughout a lot of it. And it's nice to be also with Miranda as she interacts and I get feedback from too, and I can do my feedback. So just in that, I'm really excited to hear about the, I would say, eclectic ideas and ideology and where everybody comes from and how they all can come together in this comprehensive plan to better the stewardship of the land and move forward, especially generations to come, because like everybody said, like literally the next 3 years, we don't know what's going. Technological advances are insane. So this is extremely important for me, thinking into the future, because this could be a hub of communal stabilization, right? So we can create this thing like we're all self-sustaining, we're all working with each other, growing stuff, figuring out how to be really comprehensive of understanding partnerships of everybody being collaborative. And you're like, okay, let's have some stability and care for one another while other things potentially go against.
Yeah, it's interesting, but this comprehensive plan may have more impact on the valley during the life of this particular comprehensive plan than anywhere else in the county. It is more than likely that's going to do this. Anybody up on the?
Well, it looks like, Jess, were there some comments from the public in the chat that you wanted to read?
Stephen Lippett, who is the Navy CPLO, that would be the Community Planning Liaison Officer for the Navy Observatory. He had a comment recommending including language throughout the Parks and Rec and open space, etc., that covers dark skies considerations. So I copied that out of the chat, and I'll email that to you, Melissa.
Okay. And then we heard from Thad, but he's not on it anymore.
Super, so that's it.
That would be it.
Anything you need to review before we adjourn?
Just to say Happy New Year, I forgot. Happy New Year. And thank you, and I hope to see everyone next Thursday as we do our second review of 3 chapters. So, and again, I'm happy to provide printed copies, whatever you need, and then after that, okay, I do want to ask, does it seem okay to meet on February 6th and look again at these 2 chapters for the revisions? Or is that too soon? What do you want to do with that meeting? I have it on your calendars, but is it something that do you feel okay about that? It's another meeting. I know we're adding meetings, but we go back to this. And then it would be February 20th, the 2 final new chapters for you, and then we'll package it with the introduction and we got an appendix. So I will say, so this is meeting number, what are we on today? 6, meeting number 6. You guys are doing great. I mean, could easily have been double the meetings to get there, so.
So will we have a chance to review those other ones that we hear on the 20th?
On the 23rd, oh, sorry,
20th.
for February?
Yeah.
I haven't sent them to you yet.
No, but you're gonna give them to us and then it sounds like we're not gonna get to review again or not.
No, you could, I just don't have a date.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all. I just didn't put a date. No, you could review, I just don't have a date yet.
So the 6th, that gives us 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
So the real turnaround is whether you can revise the chapters and send them to us with more than 24 hours to go.
Well, I'll give you at least a week, so I think we can. You guys were quite clear, I think, in changes, and there weren't, I mean, you're not throwing this at us and saying, go back and rewrite it, is that right? So I think we can, let me talk to Liz and Cynthia and Jessica, and we'll let you know if you feel like we need to change that date. But we'll try to make it work. Is that still, you okay?
And that's for the 6th, right?
February 6th.
So on the 23rd and the 6th, we're going to re-review chapters.
Yep.
Which chapters are we going to do? Are you going to set out 6 chapters?
So you already have an email from me for the 23rd for next Thursday,
Yes.
a week from tonight, for 3 chapters: natural environment, circulation, transportation, and diverse cultures. You have that email, and then you'll get another one from me with the 2 chapters you talked about tonight. That'll be in a week. Yeah. I gotta work on it, yeah. We might not have the mapping, that ranching, I might need to talk to you guys. kind of separately about, once we have something to look at about the ranch overlay, okay? Because it's a big lift for our GIS staff.
I have the layer. That I did with the county many years ago. I
Yeah.
can send it to you. It has all the ranches on it.
Okay, I want to see that and talk to
The
you
only
about. how-
adjustment on it will be the hard ranch. When it was made.
Okay, so we'll take a look at that and then compare it to the new.
All right, everybody, if you'd be happy to, we'll adjourn.
Yes, yeah, happy New Year, thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thanks, Billy.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This is good.
Thanks,
I'm gonna
everyone.
turn this off. Good night, everybody online, bye. Bye, Judy.
Hey, Melissa, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay, thank you, and I'm gonna shut this thing off.
Is that projector what's heating the room?
Oh,